The main thing that both the US deep state and the European deep state rejected or forgot or blindly refuses to see is that there is an alternative to the NATO being in Ukraine or Russia dominating Ukraine. It's called neutrality. It's called a buffer state. And this arrangement goes back several thousand years. It's throughout human history that when there are major empires or major powers that are in competition with each other, you leave some territory in between that doesn't suffer as a result of that. It just prevents the two sides from clashing in nose to nose. And there's nothing ignominious about neutrality. It's a very smart policy, and it worked extremely well for Sweden and Finland and for Ukraine, while Ukraine was allowed to be neutral, for Austria, for Switzerland. These are not the desperate places in the world. They're the most prosperous places in the world when you think about the World Happiness Rankings, which I happen to edit, co-edit every year with colleagues. Finland's number one. And yet the Finnish president, Stubb, laughingly said, I have to warn the Ukrainians not to become like Finland. Are you kidding? Finland had phenomenal success as a neutral state. Then, of course, the U.S. security apparatus promoted politicians like Stubb with an American backing who would defend the American-led hegemony and so forth. That was also part of the U.S. game. How do we control politics in every country? But what are the Europeans thinking? Why can't one leader just clearly stand up and say, it would be smarter if Ukraine were neutral? Not Russian, not NATO, just neutral. Not the worst thing in the world, but the best for everybody, because that would keep the wars away from us. Now Europe is in a tizzy. Oh my God, if we don't succeed in Ukraine, Russia's going to be in Paris again. As if this is 1812 and 1815, the Napoleonic Wars, which, by the way, Europe invaded Russia, not the other way around. We should continue to recall. So there's a lot of blindness, a lot of lack of the most basic recognition of reality, the most basic understanding of how we got to this disaster, from the peacemaking of Gorbachev and Yeltsin to outright war, was a U.S. deep state provocation supported by the security apparatus across Europe. Well, Trump has figured this out. Interestingly and dangerously, he doesn't have full voice in the United States, because the U.S. deep state, many neocons, many hardliners continue in the U.S. to try to push for war and run over to Europe and say, let's pull Trump back to good sense to continue the war against Russia. And that's part of the drama right now. Part of the European delusion is we can win back the United States for continued warmongering. Maybe there are parts of the U.S. security apparatus that are working hand in hand with the Europeans. We know that part of Trump's own team, General Kellogg, Mike Waltz, other hardliners are saying to the Europeans, yes, let's get our terms. The president will come along and so forth. So making peace is not easy when you've had this 30-year project of expanding hegemony, Western hegemony, mainly U.S. hegemony. Trump's trying to stop it. It could be stopped, but we're still waiting for a single, sensible European voice of a major power to tell the truth. There are many in the smaller countries, Viktor Orban or Robert Fico, who are telling the truth. There are candidates in Eastern Europe who are telling the truth, or then cut out of election campaigns and told that they can't stand. But we're waiting for a leader in Germany or France or Britain to tell the truth. Britain will be the last, I think. It always is in this regard. It's the most warmongering of all. Maybe some other European leader will begin to tell the truth.
Just as I was a very quick final question. Do you see any way of reversing any of this? Because, Europe was supposed to develop everything from, green energies and economic leadership. Now we have military Keynesianism. We're gonna be the role model for democracy. Now we're purging the political opposition from France, Germany, Romania, and of course, we used to recognize that security required us to assess the security concerns of our opponents, being it the Chinese, Iranians, Russians. But now, of course, security instead means to fight the world's largest nuclear power. How do you see any exit from this? What would it take? I know that's a big ask, but
Well, no, no, no. I mean, the exit is obvious. It would take rationality, clear thinking. And so it's not far-fetched to believe that views will change because the current views are self-destructive. They are unpopular. They make no sense. And in this sense, the puzzle, of course, is why they continue, not why they would end. So, yes, Europe could come along. The United States could lead that because most likely Trump will persevere in making peace with Russia, ending the U.S. engagement in Ukraine, and for all practical purposes, that's the end of any possibility of Ukraine continuing to fight this war, no matter what the warmongers in Europe say. So this war is going to end. It's going to end either at the negotiating table or it's going to end through Ukraine's defeat at Russia's hands. But it's not going to end the way that Starmer, Macron, Merz, and others are portraying that Russia will be defeated. So in this sense, there will be a new kind of realism. Can Europe rise above that mere fact and actually understand its strategic situation better? Could it understand that rather than $800 billion of rearming, so-called, it ought to spend a plane ticket, fly to Moscow and open some negotiations and some diplomacy? Or if it doesn't want to spend a plane ticket, invite Russian leaders to meet with them someplace else. In other words, diplomacy would be a lot cheaper, a lot more successful, a lot less painful than the course that the Europeans are set on right now. As far as I know, not one European leader of the major countries or the European Commission is in any kind of diplomacy with Russia. Now, occasionally they beg the United States, oh, please let us be at the table. It's not fair. We're not at the table. This is pathetic, to say the least. If Europe wants to negotiate with Russia, pick up a phone, dial a Zoom, fly to Moscow, invite Foreign Minister Lavrov to a meeting someplace. For heaven's sake, don't beg the United States. Open diplomacy. So, yes, it's of course possible for Europe to change. And if Europe gets off the warmongering, maybe it will reconsider its longer term strategic position as well. Because actually, strangely enough, I believe in an effective Europe, but more Europe if it's effective, if it represents the real interests of the European population. Because in an era of major powers, of the US and Russia and China and India and so forth, Europe needs to be there, not as 27 quarrelsome, belligerent, warmongering states, but as Europe. That would be very good for Europe. But under the current situation, Unfortunately, the Commission is neither effective nor representative, nor serving Europe's interests. So there needs to be more fundamental reform, but in the short term, there needs to be peace.
Yes, as a European living here, it's devastating to see the way it's run. But well, Professor
Agreed.
Sachs, it's always a great pleasure. So thank you again for your time.
See you again soon. Thanks.